And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence.
It was 1776 when the founders signed the writ of independence from the Brits. It was revolution.
Tonight's featured show is Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel. Welcome to the Republic News Network for our live national broadcast. You may call me Kelby, and tonight I'm going to be acting as your moderator. The RNN, which stands for the Republic News Network, has been doing this radio show since 2010, and it's always been a friendly introduction for the people of the United States Corporation. Here we go. It's true. The United States is a federal corporation, and their exclusive jurisdiction is in the District of Columbia. The Republic government was simply a bunch of U.S. citizens that in law don't have access to the Bill of Rights, and they realized they wanted to be Americans as our founders and our law provided each and every one of us. See, we've been hard at work since 2008, and since 2010, we have successfully re-inhabited the original government vacated under Lincoln in 1861. I know, it's hard to understand. Don't worry. We are law-abiding, peaceful Americans and very pro-government, and we love our country. You can consider the Republic members are tired of the corruption that we see every day. See, we found in the law that there is two forms of government here on the land, and we did something about it. We are people. Mothers, fathers, sons, daughters. We have families just like you. We simply found some truths, and now we're sharing these important truths with the rest of the world. So get ready to hear things that sound amazing, and get ready to understand that you too are about to be a part of history. We welcome each one of you to Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel and your Republic if you so choose. But before we go into our broadcast tonight, please bow your head in prayer.
Thank you, Lord, for this opportunity to once again be a nation free under God and being able to pray openly. Bless the people on this call. Bless this show. Allow for just that education that a lot of people don't know or understand, as in relation to securing our nation's borders. Just come under the subjection of you, and Lord, that you protect these people that are coming out and telling the truth. And we pray this in your Son's name. Amen. Mr. Happel, I yield the floor.
Well, thank you, Kelby. Tonight we've got a terrific program on Connecting the Dots. Our guests are Mr. Chuck Floyd and Mr. Bruce Moran. They are both national security experts of very, very high caliber and are currently working within the administration in various capacities as advisors and also as border security experts. And we will be learning a great deal about what has been happening over the last 40 days since President Trump took over. But with that, I want to mention that the policies that we have followed as far as border security since the presidency of George Bush Sr. have nudged and then coerced and then finally forced America to follow socialist globalist policies that are against our national self-interest and are designed to dissolve borders and create a regional superstate called the North American Union. It is modeled after the socialist and very much failing European Union. And we need to talk tonight about the urgency to stop the New World Order plan to end national sovereignty through an open border policy. And tonight, and I believe that President Trump really does understand the urgency of stopping the inflow of illegal aliens, and we're not talking legal aliens, we're talking illegal aliens, and the drugs and all the other sundry things that are part of this mess that we call an open border policy. With that, I'd like to welcome my guest, and I would start maybe if Chuck, you would give us a little bit of information on your background, and then we will introduce Bruce.
Sure. I certainly appreciate it. I look forward to the discussion tonight and informing the audience of what's going on in Washington and what the Trump administration is up to as far as securing the border. I am a retired U.S. Army officer. I spent over 20 years in the military, have traveled to over 60 countries. I've been very involved on peacekeeping and other kinds of forces. I was with at Fort Bragg. I was with the 25th Infantry Division in Hawaii, and I was also a presidential appointee under Colin Powell at the State Department, where I managed the building, helped manage the building of embassies and construction of the embassies and renovations of the embassies worldwide. We had a $50 billion budget in order to do that. And so I'm very in tune as far as security of U.S. citizens and foreign nationals abroad at our embassies and what has to be done on the border. And so we can apply a lot of our military techniques to the CBP in this effort. So we'll talk about that as the night goes on.
Okay, thank you, Chuck. Bruce, I also want you to tell our audience just exactly what some of your background is and how you are involved in the national security issue.
I can start with Chuck and I. We worked on the Secure Fence Act, which was passed in 2006. We worked with Senator Bill Frisk and Bill Workman and Cherry Harder. They were the foundation for what you're seeing in place today that will be forwarded by Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan in further legislation. So Chuck is the backbone of what happened. If you want to think of the way that happened back then, I would think of Senator Frisk as the general manager, like Belichick, Chuck as Tom Brady, and me as the running back. So you have a first-line team talking to you tonight about border security. I've worked on various sundry issues in Iraq, Afghanistan, crisis readiness, crisis preparedness with the House and the Senate. That's my formative background, and we've done, I would call it the rules of the road for Iraq. We presented it to the Coalition Provisional Authority, the Iraq Reconstruction Team, and certain of it was accepted by the Iraq government. So our team, and there's several of us, Chuck and I are prime movers in it. We do these kind of strategic planning work on national security. And I think that should cover a little bit of which I want to say about what we're doing. So we can get to the bottom. Okay, great.
Well, I appreciate that introduction, and I want, I guess, to start this conversation with you gentlemen, and I'd say let's start with Chuck, and then lead on to Bruce. But I'd like you gentlemen to explain the many problems that have developed as a result of the open border policy of the past 8+ years.
Okay, well, this is Chuck. We've had tremendous problems and issues over the past 20 years, really, and longer than that, as far as our border control, especially over the last 8 years with former President Obama. I'm so glad to say that. But we've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people come across our borders every year, and what happened is that CBP, Customs Border Protection agents, are told, look at them, record them, release them, let them go. That way they can go anywhere in the United States, and we give them a ticket saying, hey, see us in court in 6 months, and you never see them again. And so right now, the media and others say that we have 11 million illegals. It's more like 20 million illegals in our country right now. And not only have they just walked across the border, but they've flown in legally, and we have no visa control whatsoever. The Congress back 10 years ago, after 9/11, said that they were going to put this program together, and they never have. And so if somebody overstays their visa, if they're illegal in the U.S., nobody tracks them down, nobody cares, nobody does anything. And so that's just part of the system that has to happen. And President Trump, this is his main issue. This is his number one issue when he went down that escalator in New York City saying, I'm a candidate. And this past week and weekend, I was at CPAC, put on by the American Conservative Union, and illegal immigration was the number one topic. And so you had talk radio and TV icons from Mark Levin, Lou Dobbs, Dan Bongino, Sheriff David Clark. You had Ambassador John Bolton, Governor Scott Walker, Vice President Pence, President Trump, Dave Bossie, Matt Slapp, Congressman Briggs and Buck. You had all kinds of people doing nothing but talking about illegal immigration. And probably the second topic was voter fraud. And so today, just in the Washington Times, it has front page, thousands of non-citizens lurk on voter rolls. And so President Trump, when he talked about the election and illegals voting, this is key. Vice President Pence will be leading an investigation into this. Bruce, you want to comment on that?
Yes. What people were confusing when he first announced that he was going to do the border security, he announced that he was going to work with the felons and get them back to their countries, get them out of our prisons. And if you look at the cost to the American public, they're anywhere between $50 billion to $90 billion a year we'll be saving. That's what he was talking about. He's talking about getting the felons out of our prisons, the illegal aliens, and sending them back. And I think that's a key point that people are missing. It's costing us $50 billion to $90 billion a year, depending on how you want to look at the figures and how fast they get them out of the country. And I don't mean fast in a way, I mean procedurally, what Chuck has been talking about and what the President's been talking about and Vice President Pence has been talking about is you have to go through the process in figuring out who they are, what they're doing, and to what extent they are doing it. And these are people in the system, coming into the system, and coming in through the borders that we're catching as we're going through right now, as we're speaking. So that's what we're talking about. And that's a key point. And I'll lead back to Chuck.
Well, okay. Gentlemen, one thing I'd like to, if you can help me with this, I'd like to get the information of the fact that just exactly how much a year, not just criminals, but the whole issue of illegal immigration is costing our country. And I know right now the healthcare system in the state of California is literally falling apart, and much of the education system in California because of the extra bodies that are taxing that system and not producing any income. Can you kind of help flesh that out a little?
Sure. Right now, the Trump administration is saying that the border security plan is going to cost roughly around $25 billion. That's chump change to what it's costing us per year. Every year, the illegal immigration population in the U.S. is costing the U.S. taxpayer over $100 billion. And if you look at the remediations that go through Walmart, they go through Bank of America, go through Western Union, back into the countries in Central South America, that's another $50 or $60 billion. And so, our country, by spending $20 billion once, can solve hundreds of billions of dollars that it costs the U.S. taxpayer every year.
And those monies can go into our inner city programs to help our kids, to build infrastructure, to help the elderly. That's what we need to understand. These are monies that are not being used appropriately to help the American citizens. We got to get control and help Americans first. That's our program. That's our project. Put Americans first to make sure our country is safe and secure. We have law and order, and we want to do what's right for everybody in this country, so everybody can live in a peaceful and productive country and be prosperous and fulfill their American dream.
Mm-hmm. And part of that policy that you're talking about also is something that I think probably would alarm most people if they knew the extent of it, and that is the amount of illegal drugs and the amount of money that's flowing across the border through the drug cartels that control much of South and Central and America and Mexico. And that's a huge, huge problem. I don't think people realize just how big it is. Can you gentlemen talk about that?
Yes. This is a huge, huge problem. You're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars. If you can go in every state, in every county, every city, every small town in the U.S. now, and you're going to find illegal immigrants pushing drugs, you're going to find the cartels, you're going to find the gangs. You look at, take a look at Chicago, at the gang activity just in Chicago, and they've already had over 100 deaths this year due to gang violence. Usually it's over drugs. And so you have hundreds of billions of dollars that are going north and south over the border every year now. And so this has to be stopped. I mean, when we talked about just, the cost a while ago to the American taxpayer, that has, that there's nothing bigger than the amount of money going back and forth across the border with the drug activity. And, as you recall, under former President Obama, when they did Fast and Furious, the government was trying to push the guns into the cartel's hands so that they would have an issue with the Second Amendment, saying that the Americans, we had to limit gun control because we were pushing weapons into Mexico. Well, that was the federal government. That was the Obama administration doing that, helping the cartels.
Well, that's something that I'd really like to bring out in this program. I know that you said, thank God, we no longer have the Obama administration, but it's my understanding that he's only moved a few blocks away from the White House, or less than 2 miles, I guess is a better comment on that. But and that he is in the process of trying to set up a parallel government that can help to overthrow the Trump administration. I know this is a little far afield of the border security thing, but I would like to know what you gentlemen know about that, and so that we can understand really just exactly how bankrupt the past administration was when it comes to protecting the American people.
Well, if you go back and look at who Valerie Jarrett is, that explains a lot. And, she helped put together an organization, Organize for America, and they're the ones that have lately been doing all of the damage, all of the riots and everything, and all these town hall meetings and everywhere else that they've been doing. Valerie Jarrett, again, she schemed for 8 years against the American people. She grew up in Iran, and she's now an American citizen. And the whole time she was at the White House with former President Obama, she was in constant communication with the Iranians, and it's due to her that the Iranian deal happened. Over $1 billion in cash flown in at night on planes and giving them the access to nuclear weapons. That tells you everything you need to know. And it looks like Secretary Tillerson, under President Trump's direction, is going to cancel that agreement, which it's about time somebody did, because that was the worst thing that anybody could do to the American citizen and to our country. And to me, former President Obama should be put in jail just because of that one issue, let alone Benghazi, Fast and Furious, the IRS, and all the other scandals that he had. And then, of course, Valerie Jarrett was on the radio and TV as they were leaving the White House saying, oh, the Obama administration had no scandals whatsoever. Every day they had a scandal.
Bruce, would you like to comment on that?
I'd like to take a short step back in history to look at what happened to Abraham Lincoln with the obstructionists he faced during the Civil War. when he was running for office and then during office. The same thing has happened to President Trump. Every which direction he's being attacked, and he has to hold his ground and hold it firmly. And as you can see, as even today, calls were made for Jeff Sessions to, step down as the Attorney General. So you're going to see this constant barrage happening with President Trump and his fine staff and his family. His family's been terrific through this whole deal. I mean, they've been attacked personally, and they're just showing you what true American spirit and patriotism is all about. Now, if you look at just the last recent pardon Obama had was with Oscar Lopez Rivera, and he was a FALN terrorist, and he was released, and he was thrown in jail for conspiracy and sedation. I mean, and those different types of high-end crimes against the United States. And to given a known terrorist who didn't want to repent his own acts and leave him free, he'll be free in May this year in Puerto Rico. The FALN is a Puerto Rican terrorist organization. People don't know what that is. And he was caught, I believe, in 1980 and convicted, and later, and there were at least 9 or 10 others that were given pardons earlier. He was the only one that didn't want to come out of prison because he believed in the cause of the Puerto Rican independence, and he believed in not repenting, and he was given a pardon by President Obama. So if it goes to show you the way things are going, that kind of thinking is what I call reverse reciprocal relationships in our technology area, but it's opposite of what the American Constitution is all about, what we consider to be normal justice, law, and order. That's against everything we believe in as a people, as a country, what our veterans fought and died for. That's not who we are and what we believe in. So I'll leave it at there so we can talk about
Dan, one of the other things on Valerie Jarrett is that, a report just came out today where the Obama administration, under Valerie Jarrett's direction at the White House during the waning hours of his presidency, changed the rules at NSA so that more phone conversations and other recorded documents could be shared with other agencies. And they went to the FISA court twice trying to get the FISA court to allow them to go record Paul Manafort and other Trump people and Trump himself, and the FISA court came back and said, you can't do that. They went back, narrowed it, and they went after Paul Manafort and others and got documents and recordings. And because of what Valerie Jarrett and Obama did at the end of his presidency in weakening the laws and the policies of the NSA, that's why you're getting all these leaks now of President Trump. And so this was a deliberate sabotage and act by Obama and Valerie Jarrett at the end of his presidency to get the information so that they could disseminate it against President Trump.
Well, I know about that act by Valerie Jarrett because I believe, isn't it, that all the security agencies now can share information back and forth, where before they were required to keep information within their agency until it had been vetted to before it could be shared with other agencies. Is that correct?
That is correct, and by changing the procedures and the standards, they allowed a lot of the people that they associate with and are very liberal inside our government to get the information, and now it's very hard to track where those leaks coming from, and it's due to what Valerie Jarrett and Obama did at the end of his presidency.
That's amazing. Well, I guess at this point, and I think we're going to probably have more of this discussion down the road, but Chuck, at this point, I'd like I'd like for you to explain the 10 points that make up the Trump comprehensive immigration and border security plan.
Okay. Just kind of give you a background, the audience a background on what's going on. Right now, there are what we call landing teams going into each of the agencies, and on these landing teams, they have certain, for DHS, I think it's about a dozen. For DOD, it's 20-some. But these landing teams are going in, trying to put together the other appointees that will be coming in from the Trump administration and getting them settled as chief of staff and all these other positions that he has to fill. He needs to fill about probably about 5,000 positions, and he's only filled maybe 500 at the most. And so at DHS, under Secretary Kelly, you have three major agencies that are going to be involved in the immigration plan. CBP is Customs Border Protection. They're the frontline defense on the border, and so they have the legal authority to detain, detect, detain, record, and return individuals out of the U.S. ICE is they're responsible to make the arrest inside of the United States. If they see illegals, then they can arrest them. When illegals are criminals and they're released out of prison, just like in New York City, in sanctuary cities, they try not to inform ICE when they release these individuals. But ICE is the one, they're the ones that have to go pick these individuals up, put them in federal custody, and then process them and deport them. Then the other leg is the Coast Guard, who are responsible for the waterways, the Gulf, the Rio Grande, and the Pacific Ocean. And they help patrol the waterways for the drug trafficking and human trafficking. So right now, the Trump administration is looking at how do we secure the southern border. This week, they issued what we call in the federal government a pre-RFP, request for proposal. And so that was put out as a design and build of several prototype wall structures in the vicinity of the United States border with Mexico. And so what they're looking for there is information from industry, all contractors throughout the United States, as far as what kind of fence, what kind of wall should we be building, and what kind of layered security should it have. Back in 2005, the Bush administration had a fence university in Texas, and so they had contractors come in. They had about 30 different prototypes. They selected probably 4 or 5 different prototypes to build on the wall or along the Mexican border, and probably half of them have failed because people are just climbing and getting over these structures very easily. And so the Trump administration wants to do a much better job in that. And so under the plan that I wrote and provided to them, don't know whether they're going to use it or not. However, I think they should. What happened under the Bush administration is that instead of taking this piece by piece and doing different verticals, they issued the whole contract to one contractor, Boeing. Boeing is not a construction contractor. They're an integrator. They build aircraft. And so first off, they chose the wrong company, because when you need to build a structure along the entire southern border, you need to have a contractor to build the structure. Then you have the integrators put in the sensors, the cameras, and do all the integration. And so that really did not happen, and they really did not have any kind of control over the border. And so what I have proposed to the Trump administration is that they have different contractors build 50 miles of the border security plan, the physical barrier, and then they have the integrators and others come in with them as a team in order to put the layered security on. And so under that, you'd have a construction services, you would have cameras and sensor services, you'd have logistics services, communication services, and then you have to have a staff that does training, the safety, and the IT piece. And so the information technology piece is very important. And so if they broke the border security plan down where each contractor builds 50 miles of the border, then you're going to have 40 contractors under what we call a PMO, project management office. And so this is, the best, in my opinion, where that the Trump administration can get the job done, and within a year and a half, 2 years tops, you would have the entire southern border sealed, where nobody could come across without detection. And then what I'd like to do is kind of go down the plan and kind of talk about what it is. So,
okay, Chuck, I would love to have you do that. I'm going to break at this point and hand the microphone over to Kelby for a few minutes, and then when we get back, we will follow up on that.
Okay, thank you.
Kelby, the show is yours.
Of a common family. So my daughter asked me a very important question. She said, "Dad, why do you work so hard on this republic?" And I answered her, "Well, baby, the republic as given by our founding fathers is the most important form of government ever given to man." She said, "Dad, why don't you let somebody else do it?" I said, "Well, sweetheart, most of America thinks things are okay. So long as their lives are not upset, they don't have to care about the important things that are taking place in their own country. Your dad likes to do things. I just don't want to sit and wait for somebody else. And if we didn't have our founding fathers, we wouldn't have this country. They were doers. They wanted something great for their children and grandchildren. And sweetheart, so do I." Ladies and gentlemen, I wish I could say that that's what happens in almost every home of our country, but it's not. Just 8 years ago, as a man who watched an $800 billion bailout given to banks when that money could have paid off every home in foreclosure in this country, which would have resulted in the banks getting the money anyway, I realized that we had a problem. And I stood up and I did something about it. I'm asking you to do something about it. I'm asking you to not just listen to these phone calls. I'm asking you to go to republicfortheunitedstates.org and read the Declaration of Sovereign Intent. Understand what we have done over the last 8 years. Understand what our intention is, what we are desiring to do for the people of this nation. And do something about it. Participate in the phone calls. Participate in building your states. Participate in finding a governor, finding a leader, finding the body politic of people that are going to stand up and build the state. This is what we need. We need you to do something about it. We need you to be doers. Wednesday night of every week, we have a Building the States phone call at 6 p.m. Pacific. We encourage you to get on this phone call and understand how you too can be a doer. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you, Kelby. Chuck, I hated to break in on you like that, but let's go ahead and proceed so that you can explain what your border security plan is and just exactly how it works.
Okay, good. I certainly appreciate that. Now, the border security plan is only one leg of an entire comprehensive immigration policy, and so we'll get into that after we talk about the fiscal plan of security on the border. So first off, what Secretary Kelly has to do is select a barrier that will work across the entire southern border. It's going to be a wall or a fence. You need a fence because you got to see through it, both on with eyes and with technology. You'll use different kinds of fence material in the different terrains across the southern border. The northern border is totally different because of all the terrain, the trees. It's just totally different. So first off, we'll select an anti-climb fence, which we have, and we use that in Iraq and Afghanistan. Then you have to have, once you put that up, you have to have also behind it a vehicle barrier, which we use at the State Department for embassies and a lot of different places all over the world. That way you have an anti-climb for personnel, anti-barrier for vehicles. From that, which is the outer part of the security system, you have a road which is drivable. Right now, most of the roads along the southern border tear up our CBP vehicles, and they're wrecked in a year. So you have to have a road where you can get rapidly from one place to another in order to make sure the quick reaction teams have the access. From there, you need another fence on the other side of the road. Again, this is just like in Israel. So I based the plan off of what Israel has accomplished, and it works very, very well. The technology you need is a combination of several things. It's a seismic technology that you can put on the border. Glenn Spencer has taken care of this. We've been working with Glenn for years on this. We've had it on the Ladd Ranch, and it works. It's called sidearm. And this seismic technology, you can detect people walking, you can detect vehicles, you can detect animals, you can detect tunnels, and you can detect ultralights. And so that needs to be on the entire southern border. Along with that, on the other side of the second fence, you will need sensors and a camera system. So the camera system has to have the thermal for night and then visual during the day. And so these kind of technologies need to be linked into an operations center in each state, and from each state, then an operations center would be set up in D.C. so you can monitor everything. And at each construction site, you would have cameras showing all the work that's being done 24/7, so you can dial in any time of the day or night and see what's going on with the construction site at the border. You're also going to have security for each construction site because of the drug cartels. So you're going to have 50 cal weapons. You got to have snipers. You have to make sure you have total security because the drug cartels are going to be fighting this, and they have a lot of firepower. And so we're going to look at the U.S. government military side to bring in excess equipment and materials that they have used in Iraq and Afghanistan to help prepare and protect the individuals on the border who are building the security system. The other thing that is crucial is we have to have the CBP officers online. They cannot be 50 and 100 miles off the border. They have to be on the border. And so we've designed portable towers where CBP officers will be stationed for 2,000 miles. And then you have to have your quick reaction forces behind them. And in each state, within 200 miles of each other, we are designing detention centers where you bring the individuals in, you record them biometrically, everything is recorded. You house them, and then you return them to Mexico. You do not do catch and release. So these are the things that we're looking at. And then on the Gulf and the Rio Grande and Pacific Ocean, we have to have a VTS, which is a vessel tracking system with buoys for tracking watercraft. And so, again, the Coast Guard would help do that. And we in the IT area where I work in cybersecurity, we have what we call SaaS, Software as a Service. Well, we're applying that acronym to the border. We want it to be Security as a Service. That means that we can rent the government can rent. They don't have to buy, but they can rent boats, they can rent equipment, they can rent the personnel. So those kind of things we can do very, very quickly. We have a lot of retired military, other officers and enlisted that have gotten out of the military and can do this very, very well. I used to be on a task force called the MFO, the Multinational Force and Observers, in the Sinai Desert of Egypt, and we would observe all activity and weapons and things of that sort going into the Palestinians. And so we would stop the trafficking of weapons in the Sinai Desert between Egypt and Israel. And so these are the kind of things that we need to do. So that's the first leg. That's the border security. Now we can talk about the legislation and the comprehensive immigration plan. But before we start that, I'd like to ask Bruce or Dan if you all have any comments on the border security plan.
Well, I'd like Bruce to chime in on this because I know he's got a lot of experience in it too. And Bruce, would you like to comment on what Chuck was just talking about?
As Chuck was quarterbacking, I'll take the ball as a halfback and a fullback and run with it a little bit. What we're looking at now is what President Trump has said. We're going to actuate a program for border security. As I said earlier, it was initiated through the Secure Fence Act in 2006, and Chuck was one of the prime movers, and I was there to help out with Senator Frisk and Bill Wichterman. But one of the most important facets of this, it's going to be run according to not a bureaucratic model, but I would term it more of a business model. And it's not something that was normally done at the White House, like Chuck was saying. It wasn't given to a large contractor. It'll be broken up and given to people who know and will be able to work with each other on the border and be able to share knowledge. And like Chuck was saying, it's going to be 24/7 on the border. People are not going to be patrolling the border 100 miles away. Everybody's going to be on the border. They'll be able to get there through rapid access or rapid deployment. SWAT teams, as we call them in the city, or as we call overseas SOG teams, the SEAL teams, the Marine Recon. That kind of intelligence gathering with the system Chuck has proposed will be able to be deployed, like Chuck was saying, within a year and a half to 2 years at a cost-benefit model ratio we're talking about. So it's different than how Congress had initially approved the Secure Fence Act, and it's going into a more modular, effective program business model, which will help get the program off the ground in a fluid manner, what I call connecting the dots. We call it interoperability or connectivity. That's what Chuck was talking about earlier with the communications, with the construction, back up with the people who are in the military or local National Guard to protect the people who are doing the construction, defend them against the cartels who do not want it to be built. So there's a whole slew of things that are taken into consideration, just not what we talked about this evening, that can go into more detail later.
Right. And on the cost, we've done analysis on the cost on a fence and the technology, the construction, the people, and all those sort of things. And we think that we can do it much cheaper than what Boeing and others have done in the past because, again, President Trump is all about scope, schedule, budget in buildings. We can get this thing down to about $1.5 million to $2 million a mile. And before they were spending $3 to $5 million per mile, and a lot of the fencing and things they put in are useless.
Yes, sir. That's what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess what I'd like to ask you guys, how much of that secure border fence actually got built? I mean, how much do we have in place now, and is any or some of it usable?
I would say maybe 400 miles tops is usable. Other than that, what they have put up is useless. It has to be reinforced with these other layered security things that we're talking about. They spent billions of dollars, and they didn't get anything out of it, in my opinion.
I concur, and also that the technology has changed, and we're able to put the newest technology on the border with the best personnel. Border Security is hiring, I think, another 7,000 to 10,000 people, so you'll be able to man it better, be able to have more assistance through rapid deployment, and you'll have better technology. And then that'll be a big deterrent for people coming through. Like Chuck was indicating earlier, you'll have a road with two fences on each side, and people will be able to get there sooner, quicker, faster. And then also there will be drones. They'll be able to fly out, and the infrared for night and things of that nature will all help with the deterrence of illegals coming across. And we're not just talking about people. We're talking about the heavy drug dealers and the criminals and the arms dealing. We didn't even talk about the arms dealing going across, and the people trafficking that's going on. And we got to worry about that because all these people are being, even from this Central America, 80% of the women coming across are being raped. So, I mean, you have a human rights problem here. And Mexico needs to do its part because it's a portal for all these people coming through the southern countries, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Panama. They're coming through, and they're not stopping them. And that's where they're getting raped. That's where they're being abused. That's where they're being used for, working in factories and things of that nature. That's the problem. The problem exists on our border, but it also exists in how Mexico's handling the situation itself. We're not going to talk about that this evening, but let's keep on the border security. But that's what will be prevented. We'll prevent all that from happening on our side of the border. I mean, the pedophiles from the sex trafficking of the kids, all that will be stopped at the border as much as we can. It'll continue to exist here because people will be supporting it who are, pretty, perverted. But what I'm trying to say here is the program itself is sound, secure, cost-effective, and it's right on for America. It's that make America first and protect our citizens first.
Mm-hmm. Good.
So
good.
That would lead us into what do we mean as a comprehensive immigration plan? The border security is the first leg. And so Congress has a big role in this because they have to change the law. They have to have legislation that will change the policy, how things are done. And so, we really have to have people across the U.S. And again, we're going to talk about that at the very end. So make sure we have about 3 minutes where we talk about what people can do to help the border security situation. So what can Congress do? One, first, they've got to make sure that E-Verify is a law and not an option. They have to go after the employers who employ the illegals. They have to close most of the consular affairs offices of all these Central and South American governments in the U.S. Do you know that Mexico has over 60 consular affairs offices throughout the United States? Their sole purpose is to help illegals. We need to close those. Again, what I have proposed to the administration is that the number of consular affairs offices that the U.S. has in a certain country, that's all they're allowed in our country. So if we have 2 consular affairs offices and an embassy in Mexico, that's all they have in our country. Same for any other country in the world. This will stop a lot of what goes on. Again, each country must take the citizens that we arrest and want to deport back to them. If they don't, then we stop all foreign aid, we stop everything with them, and we treat them as a hostile country. And we have to be able to plan on how do we get people into our country where we need their work, their jobs, where they come in, they have specific job responsibilities with a specific company, and then they have the right to go back and forth across the border. We need that kind of legislation. We don't need the legislation we have now where once you get here, the illegals are afraid to go back because if they get caught, then they'll get kicked out again. But again, many of them don't care because they've been kicked out of the country 5 to 10 times. So there's lots of things that we have to do in order to make sure that we're not a magnet for the illegals. We cannot give them benefits. We have to target the day labor centers. We have to target the sanctuary cities. One of the key items is, why you get so many women and children in here is that we don't want to turn women and children away. Well, you're going to have to. And again, we need to take a look at the babies that are born from illegal immigrants. Should they be a citizen? I say no. I mean, if you're here in this country legally, then whoever's born here is a legal U.S. citizen. If you're here illegally, you should not. But again, all these things have to be solved by Congress. They have to, and we have a very good chance now under President Trump to do a comprehensive review and pass legislation on immigration, the number of people that come into our country every year, and what we're doing. So, again, these are just few issues that we have to deal with, but we need to deal with them. And I think in order to get this thing right, President Trump is the person to do it. Under Obama and others, comprehensive didn't mean solving the problem. It just meant that we would be adding to the problem.
Okay, good. Well, can we kind of just very quickly talk about the 10 points? I know one is to build a wall along the border. Another point is to end catch and release. Number 3 is zero tolerance for criminal aliens, and I think that certainly makes sense. Number 4 is block funding for sanctuary cities. And incidentally, we had a near miss in a town not far from me, Bozeman, Montana, where the city council was going to create Bozeman as a sanctuary city, and they had so much public outcry that they decided not to do it, through legislation, but they just made a statement that anyone is welcome in their city at any time under any circumstances. So that's kind of scary. But in any case, then one of the determinants is to cancel the unconstitutional executive orders and enforce all immigration laws. I think that's terrific. Going to suspend the issuance of visas to any place where inadequate screening will keep, to keep that from becoming an issue too. And then ensure that other countries take their people back when we order them deported. You just mentioned that. And finally, complete the biometric entry-exit visa tracking system. Can you gentlemen get into that, just exactly what that would be?
Okay. Before we get there, one of the things that I have suggested to the administration on these sanctuary cities and politicians is that Congress, again, this should be part of the comprehensive legislation. The Congress should pass a law saying that if a politician knowingly and subverts the U.S. law on immigration, then that politician is subject to arrest and criminal and legal issues against that politician. If, for example, Kate Steinle, when she was shot, she didn't, her family couldn't sue. Well, there has to be legislation out of Congress to target these individuals, these politicians who knowingly subvert the law. So that's a key issue that I think has to be done. You look at Rahm Emanuel in Chicago, you look at the mayor of New York, San Francisco, all these other cities that allow this, and they're not held accountable or responsible. Mm-hmm. On the biometrics, again, Congress passed a law saying that they wanted the executive branch to put this biometrics in place for people entering the U.S. By visas so that they could track them and know where they are, and then once their visa expired, they could find them. Well, that has not been done. And so that's going to be a real push by the Trump administration to get that in place. And so you're going to have the big integrators such as Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, all these kind of guys really looking at that system, because it's going to take a big company to put this thing together and to manage it. And then the key is you're going to have the ICE agents. Again, President Trump said he's going to hire 10,000 more ICE agents, and I think it was 5,000 more CBP agents. And so we need the man force, the workforce, whether men or women. We need the workforce to be able to go after the visa overstays, and you can use the biometrics in order to track them and know where they are.
This is the same thing. It's important that we mention that this isn't a system of biometrics for the legal immigrants. This is strictly for really for the people that come here on temporary or restricted entry and exit visas. I'm right on that, correct?
Yeah, temporary visas. You look at, a lot of the Afghans and Iraqis would come over to go to a certain military school, and they would disappear. And so you got to go find them. And so, anybody on a temporary visa, temporary here in the U.S., you have to have the biometrics in order to track them and know where they are.
What we're saying is we're looking at it from a logical perspective. If you go to any other country and you overstay your visa, they tell you have to renew it or you leave the country. Our country doesn't do that. If any other country you go to, if you overextend your visa, then you're fined at some point. A day or two, they'll fine you $15 a day. So we're asking to do something very logical and reasonable and rational that is normally done in most countries, and I don't see why that cannot be instituted in the United States. And if you're like I registered myself for global entry. They took all my biometrics so they know who I am if I'm coming through. So if you go through global entry and you're at the airport, you get quicker access. They allow you to pass through. So what you're suggesting is, yes, it shouldn't be for every U.S. citizen, but at certain points you might need to have it for your own security. And for your own security, like global entry, if I need it for business like I do, the kind of business I do, then I go through. So it's discretionary for American citizens, but it's mandatory for foreigners coming in who aren't American citizens.
I like that idea much better than some form of national ID, the real ID, that sort of thing, because we've been very, very strongly against anything that would make it more difficult for our own citizens.
You're talking our Constitution,
get around.
Our individual sovereignty. I agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
But if you think of everybody that's on Facebook and Twitter, they're giving everything away.
Oh, sure.
So what's going on here? I mean, as you and Chuck were discussing earlier, with all the information coming from the NSA down to the different agencies and departments, the 16 or 17 it was given to, then you have all that information on American citizens given away without a court order.
Yeah, the main thing on this visa entry program with the biometrics is that, once you have that in place, you have to be able to search the databases of the states, of the counties, of the cities, and you have to have the cooperation of all these other police entities, because once you query the system and you're looking for somebody, you have to have the cooperation of the state, local, and the feds all at the same time in order to make sure that you catch the person that you're looking for.
Well, I have to say, and we are running out of time, gentlemen, but I am going to ask you if you would please consider coming back next week, and we'll continue this discussion, because I think we've just barely scratched the surface, and I I think there's a lot more to be said on this whole subject, but the one point I would like to make before we end the program is that if we had not allowed all this illegal immigration to go on for so long, so many of these things that we're talking about as far as tracking and security and all these other things wouldn't have been necessary. No. And so the longer we allow this to go on, the worse it's going to be.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And so for citizens and your audience, all the dedicated, loyal Americans out there, you have to stay informed. Call your elected leaders. Tell them what you're thinking about. Call people that you know that are part of the administration and make sure that they know what you're thinking and that you support them. Go to town hall meetings and do not let them shut you down. Write articles and help the Trump supporters change the government for the best.
Okay, thank you, Chuck. I appreciate that. And with that, I'm going to have to turn the program back over to Kelby. But if you gentlemen will be on board with this idea, we'll continue with this discussion next week on border security and illegal immigration. So thank you both, and we will have you on again next week.
Okay, thank you.
God bless you, and thank you.
Kelby,
ladies and gentlemen, that concludes this week's show with Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel. God bless. Good night. We'll see you next Thursday, 6 p.m. Pacific.